Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description.
Hello everybody. If Jaguar were a betting man, you'd never ask it for a hot tip, because here you have a company that for nearly 4 decades now has made the worst possible call at the worst possible moment, almost without exception. When the world said, can we have a more economical car? They said, yeah, sure, have this slightly smaller and just as thirsty, but now slower V8. When it said, we want something forward-looking and futuristic, they said, have you seen this lovely retro S-Type? And then, when it came to building a car for the masses, something I think a Jaguar probably shouldn't be, instead of giving people the hatchback or the SUV that they wanted, instead they came up with the X-Type. And then they bet big on China, which at the time looked like a market with a near infinite growth potential. And surprise, surprise, that turned out not to be the case. They also invested massively in diesel, going so far as to make it the range topper in many of their models. And that was a particularly poor decision, because not only did those turn out to be rather iffy engines with some fairly serious problems, not too long after, diesel became about as popular as a fart in an elevator. Ford also invested hundreds of millions in the firm, giving them a fantastic aluminium platform, which was leagues ahead of the competition, only for them to go and not use it in one of their most important and biggest sellers, the XF. At least until they facelifted it in 2015, by which time it was potentially too late. Then they canned their mighty flagship, the XJ, which granted was due for replacement, but in its stead they wanted to bring out an all-new electric car. Had they launched that car, it would have been a game changer. This would have been one of the first times that a mainstream automotive manufacturer, beside the likes of Tesla, had brought out an all-electric car at that price point. It would have beaten Porsche and Audi to the punch, and given the company directors of the world something to spend their money on. But for whatever reason they decided, no, let's just cancel that. They invested in an all-new 6-cylinder petrol engine to then not go and put it in the XE, XF or the F-Type, the cars in which an engine like that would have sold. Their 3 Series equivalent, the XE in particular, was crying out for a sporty model, and rather than give us an M3 equivalent, they went and built the Project 8, a madcap £150,000 super saloon that was then available only in left-hand drive, and predictably didn't sell too well. And I'm really not quite sure whether Jaguar ever had a game plan, but I'm pretty certain that letting your entire model lineup stagnate to the point where every single car you sell is now at least 10 years old and has never had a major upgrade, well, it's not a great business plan, is it? Then they made the big, bold decision to can the whole lot and effectively start again, relaunch the Jaguar brand as a new upmarket alternative to the likes of Bentley, which in some ways I kind of like. Then they went and shot themselves in the foot with what must be one of the daftest marketing campaigns ever, and told everybody that the new car was going to be an EV, which shouldn't really be a surprise, but once again they timed it absolutely wrong, because now the world has decided actually we don't really want to buy EVs. But even a broken clock is right twice a day, and in their time Jaguar have certainly had their fair share of hits. And this, the F-Pace SVR, has got to be one of them. More than that, with the new models allegedly still being all electric, there is a chance that this might be the final combustion-engined Jaguar ever made. And in today's video, I'm going to be asking if this is a worthy tribute to a brand that over the decade really has given us some brilliant driver's cars. This should be good. this is not my first time in an F-Pace SVR. I in fact got one from Jaguar themselves about 5 years ago. I rather enjoyed it. It was fast, it was fun, it made silly noises, and it was actually a fairly usable thing, if a little bit big, on some of my favourite roads. However, it also has the unfortunate distinction of being one of just 2 cars ever loaned to me that failed to proceed. The other one also being a Jaguar. It one day just decided it didn't want to turn on. The electrics had totally and completely failed. We never understood why. It sort of fixed itself after a couple of hours, but that was embarrassing. However, that was a long time ago. Now you cannot buy a new F-Pace. In fact, you cannot buy a new Jaguar currently, full stop, leaving you simply with a selection of used ones. And I have to say, I did not know what great value these had become, because you can now pick yourself up an early example of the F-Pace SVR for just over £30,000. And allow me to give you 542 reasons why that might be a good idea. Now look, there are a million different reasons why you might not want yourself a great big overly powerful SUV. And I completely get it. These are stupid, needless cars. Yet, people keep buying them. And I do also get there are a few reasons why you might want one. You get this nice, tall driving position, which people like for some reason or another. Yeah, in the countryside, I will admit, it does give you a few advantages. You can see a little bit further, makes placing the thing a little bit easier, which is handy because this is not a particularly long car at 4 3/4 meters, but it is fairly broad at just over 1.9. And it's a difficult thing to place this. Now, it doesn't seem quite as difficult as the last one that I drove. Maybe I've just gotten used to these things, but you're still taking up all of your side of the road. You got to exercise a lot of caution with this thing. But there are a whole bunch of other cars out there where I could say exactly the same thing. And I think the sizing of this, on paper at least, actually works fairly well. It sits between a Porsche Macan and a Cayenne. Inside there is room for 4 adults, and let's take a moment to appreciate the specification of this particular car. It's in a bespoke powder blue exterior, which I've got to say I really like, over an ivory interior with plenty of leather, carbon fibre instead of the usual aluminium or piano black. There's an Alcantara headlining with panoramic roof, beautiful perforated leather steering wheel, and this is a great place to be. There's one thing I always talk about when I drive a Jaguar or a Land Rover, and it's the sense of warmth you get in them. A light interior is absolutely key to that. These are the sorts of cars where, when the weather is not quite so good and you're a little bit stressed, you've had a long day at work, you can sit in and just go, ah. The boot is also a pretty good size. This car currently fully laden, as its owner, the lovely Brian, is currently on his way to the continent. And as I am on the way to the ferry port, he said he'd stop off and lend me his car for review. And as it happens, this is not actually a car that he was intending to buy at all. Yes, he also has an Aston Martin DB11, which he uses for journeys out and about when it's just him and his partner, and it's a lovely thing. But by his own admission, for country lanes, it's fairly broad, and it's not the kind of car that he wants to take to the shops. Where he lives, you also don't have much opportunity to stretch the engine in that, so he decided that he wanted something that was sensible, easy to run, easy to live with, but still good to drive, and so he bought an I-Pace, the electric Jaguar 4x4, which is yet another great example of a car where they completely and totally screwed things up, because by all accounts the I-Pace was actually a very good thing, But Jaguar's typical reliability issues struck, and over time, they just didn't do anything with it. So what started out as a very advanced, high-specification car, come the end of its life, was lagging behind in just about every conceivable department. But still, they are, as with just about every EV out there, an excellent second-hand buy. So he bought one. And then it started giving him issues. The battery pack was down to 70% of its life. That's not good. The charging cable refused to lock in. The car was bought from a Jaguar dealer with the Jaguar warranty, and they said that they would fix it. But when they looked into the issue, they realised the entire battery pack needed replacing. And that is £30,000. With the whole car only being worth 25, they agreed to buy it back. This then left him in the situation where he needed to replace his car. He wanted something that was going to be decent for when you had extra people or needed to go on a long journey with lots of luggage, etc, etc. And he wanted to retain that instant shove that you get from an EV. But of course, didn't want another I-Pace. And this was his solution. And what a petrol-heady way to fix that problem. And the reality is that though this will have been a much more expensive car to buy, this is a 2022 example, these still command at least about £50,000 to £60,000 depending on mileage, specification, etc, etc. The reality is that I don't think this is considerably more expensive to run than an EV if you are doing longer journeys where you have to charge at public points as opposed to doing so at home, and his overall mileage isn't that high anyway. If he were to buy just about any EV you care to mention at this kind of price point, I am fairly confident that that would depreciate far more than it would save in terms of running cost. However, back to the F-Pace. This is the sister car to the Range Rover Velar, which itself also had a bit of a frosty reception, because it too had a number of issues. The F-Pace has seemed generally pretty good, particularly if you go and buy this one, the 5-litre. And this is the one that you want to buy, at least if you're a petrol head. 550 PS, 502 pounds-feet of torque, that's 680 Newton meters. And that is sent to all four wheels via a ZF 8-speed automatic gearbox. The car also has adaptive dampers. This one came on 22-inch alloys, but it's now on 21s, and with Pirelli Scorpion all-season tyres. And this means that the ride is actually really damn good. I've currently got it in dynamic. It's made a little bit of a difference, though I'll admit, not a massive one. And it's wondrous, this thing. But that engine, oh, it's the star of the show. Now, I've experienced this in a great number of different cars, and you cannot deny the fact that here it is a bit blunted by the curb weight of the thing. This clocks in at around 2.1 tonnes. But we now seem to be in a world where that's no longer as much as it was. I drove recently the BMW i4. That has a similar amount of power, and that weighs 2.3 tonnes. This 8-speed gearbox is also fantastic. The aluminium paddles behind the wheel, very nice to hold. Response both up and down, lovely, and often accompanied by a nice little crack or bit of burble. And this might actually be a rare case of the car benefiting from tighter noise regs. Some of the earlier Jaguars, like the F-Pace and particularly the F-Type SVR, those were a bit too much. The exhausts were just ludicrously over the top. I know some liked that kind of thing, but for me, in a Jaguar, it was a touch uncouth. Visibility is pretty good straight ahead. To the side it's alright, although this B-pillar is too far forward for my liking. To help you park, the car does have 360-degree cameras and they work fairly well. This notably is also the first time I've gotten to drive a facelift example of the F-Pace, which has an all-new interior. This system at a first glance looks a little bit fiddly and unintuitive, but I've spent a little bit of time playing around with it and I've got to say I quite like it. Most importantly, it also supports Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, meaning it's a very nice and easy thing to live with. And I have to say that though at first glance I don't like this HVAC panel, with many of the controls being touch sensitive, it's actually genius, because the main thing you'll ever want to adjust, cabin temperature, is still done by a proper physical control. It's a little rotary selector they've used on a few cars now, and you can turn it either clockwise or anti-clockwise to turn your temperature up or down, or if you press it, that will then give you the controls for your seats, which in this at the front are both heated and cooled. In here you've also got a heads-up display, a Meridian surround system, which is nowhere near as good as they would like to tell you, of course electric adjustment and memory for the seats. Did I say I like these performance seats? Because I really like these performance seats. And I love the fact they've even got nice quilted leather on the back of them too. Now, it's not a perfect experience. These stalks behind the wheel do feel just a touch flimsy. Don't know why, but they do. The controls on the wheel also are a little annoying and unintuitive, and the dash itself is a little bit unresponsive, which is a shame. The gear lever down here I love in look, but in operation it's not particularly nice. It's of the variety that always returns itself to center, and I just don't like those as a general rule. To the left of it, you'll then find the controller for the drive modes and things like your exhaust button and your traction control. Now, this actually is very, very nice to touch, use and hold, but you can't really see what any of it says, at least not when there's any amount of light in this cabin. And it's little things like that that do irk me, because I got in this car and it was the first thing that I noticed, and I can't imagine that somebody somewhere along the design process didn't notice that as well and go, yeah, those need to be brighter. Now, as it happens, Brian is about to take this over to the continent, and that is where my good buddy Michael currently is. He bought himself one of these, I think sometime last year, and he has been loving it. He's gone through all sorts of different cars in his time, had everything from Beetles to McLarens. But his F-Pace SVR, he loves it, because it is the perfect petrol head daily. When you want to be sensible, do the school run kind of stuff, it'll do that happily. And then when you want to have a bit of fun, be a bit of a hooligan, it'll do that too. And I must say, the thing that's really pleasing me is the quality of the ride. Around town, they're just a little bit bouncy, but for the most part, for a car with this kind of performance potential, it's fantastic. Now, it's been a long time since I've driven a regular one, and I can't remember if that was on the 22s or not, but I suspect these winter tyres and the slightly smaller wheels, slightly smaller, 21s, that is the world we live in now. Whew, they've got to be contributing. They're also pretty big things as well. 265 section wide at the front and 295 at the back. And I'm not even upset at the fact that this has some more wintry rubber on, because it means you can access the car's performance at slightly lower speed. And it is a wonderfully engaging thing, this. Let's have a bit more of it, shall we? It's not actually that fast. I'm not saying this is slow, but the engine's got a fair bit to carry around. Thing is, that's absolutely fine. It's still got more than enough for you to have fun, and you drive it like a big, oversized Golf GTI. Well, Golf R, I suppose. It actually leans in the corners as well, so you get a good sensation of exactly how much you're asking of it. And because it's got a supercharged as opposed to turbocharged engine, it does precisely what you ask of it. A couple of weeks ago I had the Audi RSQA, and that was such a frustrating car because although I'm fairly confident it was certainly quicker than this, the engine, it was far more binary. Either gave you everything or nothing. This, you can modulate. Oh, those gear shifts. Lovely. Now look, I know that for many people a Jaguar will always be a saloon car, driven either by Arthur Daly or Mark Strong, depending on your era, but a Jaguar should have space, pace and grace. This has got space, just about the right amount. It's definitely got pace, and as SUVs go, I think it's got a bit of grace too. Oh yeah, You can feel that rear end just coming to move around a little bit. Those winter tyres finding the limit of what they're happy to do. And the chassis, very, very communicative. The steering's on the light side, but actually has a good amount of feel coming through it. Those big old brakes, still solid discs, kind of surprisingly. Not grooved or anything like that. They do a decent job. You could, if you wanted, get carbon ceramics with these, but nearly nobody did. I'm not really much of an SUV person. I've only ever owned one in my life. But if I were, this is not a bad shout. And I really, really hope that the Jaguar story is not over. There is certainly another chapter to come. We know that. Something is on its way. With luck, it'll not be Jaguar's final chapter. But if this, the F-Pace SVR, does wind up being the final combustion-engined Jaguar, then I think the firm can at least say that chapter of their history ended on a high note. It's a great car, this. Properly brilliant. And they did deserve to sell more. And they have nobody but themselves to blame for the fact they didn't. Because the other engines weren't so good. There was no real decent halfway house between the slower ones and the quicker ones. They did have issues with those engines too, and Jaguar dealers, for the most part, they're just not good. And now, there's not many of them left either. Yet another respectful horse rider on the road. And you know what? Not entirely unlike Lotus. This wasn't the fault of the engineers. They were brilliant people, doing a good job. Instead, it was management making foolish decision after foolish decision. And every now and again, they made a great one. That's what this is. Anyway, I want to say a big thank you to Brian for bringing his car out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.